and welcome back to another video. So I hope you're not sick of seeing Masaki because I'm painting Masaki today, and I know last week's video was also Masaki themed, I guess, Masaki themed, surrounding Masaki, I guess, because it was the sketchbook page. So I'm still working on next week's video, which was what I did the poll on. So it was either going to be a sketchbook page 12, I believe, or a watercolor illustration. So the illustration that I planned is a full body illustration, and then for the sketch page I'm actually designing a new original character, a new OC that will be alongside Masaki, kind of as like a little brother figure kind of thing. So yeah. So for this particular painting, as usual, I'm using my palette Color Eno in the color red to do my first sketch, which is kind of like my rough sketch. And then I take a kneaded eraser and lighten up the sketch. So I did the first sketch off screen because initially I wasn't gonna do this video for this week, but I actually quite like the sketch and I decided to paint it on camera. So actually, I'll put on the screen what this is based off of because I was looking back at old sketches of Masaki that I had in previous sketchbooks, and I stumbled upon a sketch. It was like a very rough sketch. I think it's like a 2-minute sketch of Masaki and he's like biting the petal of a flower or whatever. I'll put it up on the screen. It pretty much looks like exactly what I drew here, except for this one's more detailed, obviously. Yeah, and that hand. The hand looks weird here. It looks okay when I paint it, I believe. I think it's because it needs the shadows. Back on topic. Actually, what was I talking about? Holy crap. Okay, so basically, after I do the rough sketch, what you just saw right now, I did the tight sketch, I guess, or the cleaner sketch with a normal mechanical pencil, probably HB lead, and it's in 0.5. And then here are my watercolors. So I'm using Holbein as usual, and along with some of my assorted other watercolors like M.Graham and Co. and then Grumbacher Academy watercolor paints. So right now I usually put a light beige-ish yellow. This one's more beige than yellow, but I usually put that as a base for the skin and then let that dry and then do the shadows. Now, one thing that I did kind of screw up, I fixed it later, but you can see that the face is gonna look a little patchy in the beginning because I forgot this paper, so I'm using a different sketchbook. I'll put that on the screen probably earlier on. So I'm using my Strathmore 400 GSM soft cover sketchbook, and this sketchbook was the sketchbook I usually use, and it was kind of like my favorite sketchbook to use for like paintings and stuff until I started using my 500 Strathmore 500 series watercolor paper, which is also 300 GSM, but because it comes in a roll, it's just less accessible to me, so I did make my own sketchbook, and then I usually do like headshots and stuff in that one because I just find it's more easier to do like headshots in the square format sketchbook, as well as like the paper has a lot of tooth to it, so doing thin line art doesn't really work for me if I'm doing something small like a small chibi or like my regular size chibis in that sketchbook. So the mistake I did in this sketchbook was that this sketchbook doesn't absorb water as fast as my 500 series paper, and because of that, basically, when I put down the skin, as it's absorbing, well, I guess for this paper, it doesn't absorb as fast. So when I'm putting down like the pink, kind of near his eyes and his cheeks, along with the skin, it doesn't like disperse in the same way. It kind of just sits on top because I was working a little too wet. And that was kind of a habit of me using the other sketchbook prior and forgetting how this paper works. So this paper, I usually use a little bit less water. I'm using a lot more water today, only because I'm trying something a little bit different where I'm actually letting the colors kind of mingle together near like the flowers and his apron and his sweater. Because usually when I paint, I usually like to have things very like clean and crisp, and it just, to me, that's how I work. But in watercolors, sometimes it's nice to let things bleed as they're supposed to, you know, let things layer and use watercolor how it kind of should be. So here I'm just adding more shadows to the face. One thing I do like doing when I'm using the other watercolor paper is layering blue on top. Now when I'm layering blue here, it might be because I'm using the wrong blue when I was doing the skin here. It doesn't leave a nice cool tone on top. It kind of meshes in with the color beneath. So when I'm using my 500 series watercolor paper, I feel like I can layer stuff better because the paper kind of like locks in the pigment a bit more than this one. This paper kind of lets the pigment, I think, sit on top rather than the pigment sinking through, which is good and bad. If you like to lift up pigment, I do like papers like these where the paper isn't sucking in the pigment, so you can easily lift off like the paint and, you know, correct mistakes if you need to, or if you want to lighten up an area, and you can just dab it with a paper towel. But when I'm using the other paper, I usually have to be very careful not to be too messy, I guess. But that's also just my personality. I do like things to be controlled and a bit more crisp. So here I'm putting in the shadows for Masaki's hair. Right now, Masaki looks a bit weird. I don't have the iris in yet, or like the painting really doesn't come together until I do the line work. I think line work for me fixes my paintings more or less, only because like I do the line art in watercolors for a little bit of a softer look. But yeah, I do envy the people who can do beautiful line work beforehand and then paint it in. But for me, like, I just don't like maybe the process of it. I do like doing it this way, and I know this way is not for everyone. Some people don't like the idea of almost like losing your sketch after you paint it, because if you do a lot of like dark washes, you won't be able to really see your pencil sketch as much. But even for this one from Masaki, my hand was a little bit heavy when I was doing the line art. I'm not sure why. I think it's because I thought that the paper could just take it, I guess. I'm usually a lot lighter handed. My hand's not as heavy when I'm working on my 500 series because I don't want to dent the paper. But here, for some reason, I just went ham with the pencil and I went quite dark. But because the pencil's still quite thin and the graphite can only pretty much be only a certain darkness, I guess, the watercolor more or less covers it because I tend to use quite dark colors when doing the line art. So here I'm doing the line art. So yeah, so the brush I'm using is a size 8. I believe it's a script brush. Most size 8 rounds are a little bit bulkier, I believe, in the bristles. These ones are quite thin and straight, but it's my favorite brush. I do have a size 6, which I believe the point on my size 6 isn't this, like, not quite as sharp as this one. But I definitely do have brushes that are more pointy, especially like, I think it's my, is it the Kolinsky brush? One other brush that I used in the 4 color challenge. It does have a sharper tip, but it's so soft that I can't control it. So I do like the synthetic hair brush a lot more. And I don't know, this is probably a bad habit because I was talking to another person about this, but I only use one brush for this whole painting, and like for the most part, like this painting's about the size of my hand when like outstretched, I guess, maybe just a bit bigger. But I work fairly small usually, but if I'm working bigger, I do pull out my size 12 brush and I use that to block in a lot of the bigger colors and stuff. But I use my size 8 for both like my, I guess, my washes as well as my fine line work. It doesn't work for everyone, but do experiment if you do end up doing watercolor. Definitely try out different brushes, different techniques. Do wet on wet, wet on dry, dry on wet. like kind of dry brush on dried paint, a bunch of different techniques and stuff. Yeah, I actually really do love doing like the line work for watercolors. I find it very fun. So next week I will be making hopefully a sketch page of a new OC. He's right now he's being developed. Hopefully by next week I should have a better idea of his design, so we can just do a whole 2-page spread of him so we get to know the character a bit more. I'm still thinking of like color schemes and stuff. I would like him to either be blue and red or blue and gold, I think. Basically, he's gonna be like a naive, bratty 12-year-old that visits Masaki. I want him to be like an only child and Masaki to be an only child, and kind of them to have like a brotherly relationship. Yeah. One day I'll talk more about Masaki's story, because Masaki actually doesn't live with his family. He moves to the side of a city for university. So yeah, that's kind of where this is headed. So last but not least, I'm using gouache to finish off this painting. My gouache low-key wanted to like explode everywhere because the paint's like literally coming out of the tube. But yeah, I just do a bit of highlights, usually for the hair, a little bit of the face, and I did a little bit for his outfit. And I decided to add petals on top. So I mixed the same pink with my white gouache and used that so I could put it on top of Masaki's hair and his outfit, just to give it a little bit more interest, I guess, instead of having the petals only pretty much behind him. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end the voice over here, and I'll talk to you guys next week, hopefully for Sketchbook Doodles page 12. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you guys very much for liking my OC Masaki. A lot of you guys were saying like, oh, you're glad you see Masaki more often now, or like you're always happy when I draw him. So thank you very much, and I do hope you enjoyed this video. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys next week, and bye!